Well, hello, everybody. Hey, hey, hey. You have double trouble with me today. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa, Thursday edition with Dr. Dennis Carroll. Yay. And we're going to be talking about Beyond the Ice Wall, Secrets of Antarctica. So I think so many of us have been wondering. I think, yeah, we've had these conversations numerous times over the years about what could be happening there, but no better expert than our resident cryptid folklore expert, Dr. Dennis. Welcome. How are you?
Good evening, morning, noon, or night, wherever you may be, and it's good to be here. And you have really picked a good subject here, the beyond the ice wall. What is waiting for us beyond that ice wall? I tell you, the big word mystery. Okay, there's definitely written on that. But many years ago when I started getting into this field, there were many major mysteries in the world. I love a mystery. Okay, that's the one thing that drives me. That's the all in my engine. Okay, and definitely mystery. And what would the world be without its mysteries? And one of the big mysteries is the world itself. And we were lied to over the years. They told us a blatant lie. The whole world has been explored. We know all about it. We know it. And that is so much of a lie that is despicable. Okay, it really is. That's one thing about me. You can step on my blue suede shoes, you can mess my hair up, but don't you insult my intelligence. Okay, that's one
Right.
thing you don't do. Yeah, I don't like to see. I don't like that to be done. I don't like to see people's intelligence insulted, and they are definitely doing that with the Antarctic. Okay, and a lot of other things amongst that. But when it comes to these mysteries, why are they mysteries? Because they're not telling us the truth on some of this stuff, or they're not letting the truth out. And what we were discussing earlier before the show, there is, something that they've done to our history. They're controlling history because that controls us. They control the narrative, okay? And that's what they're trying to do, and that's why they're covering stuff up. And that's why the skeletons of giants disappear in the Smithsonian. That's why nobody really knows what's under the pyramids. The list goes on and on and on, and nobody knows what's beyond that ice wall. But there's a lot of hints to it, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I hope you're ready to travel to those snowy regions and do some pole dancing today.
Well, I could tell you, I could certainly go down to the northern regions because, wow, it's so hot. We have a heat wave here. So definitely some pole dancing in the north. I listen, that's very interesting because, when you're listening to the guys that talk about the flat earth theory as well, you know, I mean, it's not about just sort of falling off the side of the world kind of thing. But what they're saying is there's a lot beyond those ice walls. There's an entire world existence that's out there that's been closed off to us as well. That we are not allowed to see. They've stopped us from seeing. They stop any human from going there. But then you're hearing stories. Over the years, I've listened to podcasts and stuff about guys, and they talk about what's across there. They see things. So yeah, I'd love to know what your take on that is, Dennis.
Well, I think, like I said earlier, there's a lot that we're not being told. And when you look at the Google Maps, and Africa is one of those places, the show that we did recently on the cryptids of Africa, of the Congo,
Sorry,
there's a
please
lot of
carry
that.
on. I'm just carry on, Dennis. Carry on.
Done. And that is something that, when you look at these maps and you see blank places where there should not be, you have to begin to wonder what is going on here. This is definite signs of a cover up. I know, and I know a cover up. I know it when I smell one, definitely. And this is got a very valid smell to it. It's a definite cover up. And that's like I said before, you hear about disclosure, this, disclosure. You're never going to get real disclosure from these people, my friends. They're not going to do that because they're going to always keep going with that game of smoke and mirrors. And if we ever get disclosure, it's going to come through us and not through them. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the way it is, because you cannot trust these people. It's like, you can't trust the fox in the hen house. Once he gets in there, you know what he's going to do. And that's what these people have done. And they're trying to fool us that way and to keep these things a mystery to us. But when you look at these Google Maps and you look at like the Congo, for instance, in the dark continent, I like to call it the dark continent of Africa, because there is still a lot of territory in Africa we don't know about. And the Congo is one of those that I talked about on the other show that we did. And there's a lot of blank spaces in the map on it, because they just don't know a lot of what's going on there. Okay. But now there are certain areas of this planet that it is hard to get satellite imagery of. And some of those places can be like the rainforest, which is what the Congo mostly is, and especially a place like the Antarctica and the Arctic itself. For many, many centuries, there have been rumors of openings of the Arctic and the Antarctic, the openings at the poles supposed to be there that supposedly lead to underground worlds and all that. This is a fascinating study, and should do a complete show on nothing but the underground one day, because that's a fascinating aspect. But Byrd flew over these places back in, I think, in 1929, and it's been a long time ago. But he flew over both the Arctic and the Antarctic, and he said he reported some very strange things. And it really boggles my mind that nobody has ever really wanted to go and follow up on a lot of these things he reported. That's what really gets me. Doesn't that pique your interest a little bit? Doesn't that make you want to find out what's going on there? And it's almost as if when you talk about this, you reach a blank wall. There's a blank wall in front of that ice wall, okay, that they don't want you to go over. And it's put there on purpose. And because they don't want you to know what I was being. Now, I'm not a big proponent of flat earth theory, okay? But I believe, if you look at it the right way, that this world that we live on is very dimensional. I believe there may be different dimensions that we're dealing with here, more so than a flat out kind of a thing. And I think that when you talk about these dimensions, you're definitely going to be pointing to the Antarctic. It would definitely be another dimensional aspect of this world. And, we've talked about Tartaria and all that, and all the people that supposedly disappeared in that, and the buildings and all that. It is a well-known fact, and we're going to have to do a show on that one day too, giants. Okay, giants are a fascinating subject. And it is a well-known historical fact that a lot of the so-called things that still exist to this day, the walls that we see, some of the ruins of the temples and all this stuff, are directly connected to Tartaria, and also to the fact that a lot of the ancient world was supposedly built by what? Giants. They supposedly built these walls. You have the stories in Greece. You have the stories in Rome. The stories go on and all over the world about these giants building these things, okay? That's another dimension of this world that we need to explore and understand what was going on with that. The Nephilim that the Bible talks about. And, the Bible makes one very important statement that really sticks under my saddle, okay? And it keeps me wondering about it. And it said this: if you think something is new, if you think there is no new thing under the sun.
No, nothing.
Okay, that's a very distinct statement here. There's no new thing under the sun. If you think it was of old, if it's new, no, it was old, of olden times before. What's he trying to tell us here? And that, I think, is what the connection to Tartaria and some of these other places in Lemuria and Atlantis and all this stuff is connected in this different dimensions that we're going to talk about. But what is that connection with the ice wall? Okay, let me tell you something. It's going to blow your mind. I want you to think about this very carefully. You go back to the very first movie about King Kong, okay, the original one that I think was done back in the 30s, okay. It was a groundbreaking movie because of the special effects and King Kong, the giant ape, and the dinosaurs that they run into. Think about this island that they went to and found, the island of Kong, where he was the king of this region, and he kept the dinosaurs in line. Remember that? All that stuff. Where do you think the inspiration for that come from? Admiral Byrd, okay? Supposedly he saw some stuff flying over the Antarctic that got a lot of people's imagination fired up here. Okay. And a lot of these screenwriters, now, if you're a Hollywood screenwriter, you're always looking for what? The next story, because that's where you're going to make your next bit of money at. Okay. You're always looking for the next story that you can do something with. And definitely, without a doubt, some of those screenwriters read some of the accounts of Admiral Byrd. Now, let's talk about Byrd for a few minutes before we get into what's on the other side of that ice wall. Byrd was a very interesting fellow. He was sort of the cut out of the same cloth of the ancient explorers. I love those guys, De Soto and Bacon and a lot of these other guys. They lived in the days of the great explorers, like Francis Drake, who was my favorite, by the way. Drake was the best. You see these guys that went out exploring, and I love them because they were adventurous guys. Okay, they would get the backing of queens and kings to go look for these things, like Columbus did, trying to find the India and all that. They were great. Okay, Admiral Byrd's cut out of the same cloth as these guys. Okay, that's what I like about him. He was an explorer at heart. He definitely was. And you got a very special person when you are an explorer, okay? Because you're out seeking what? What is the number one thing an explorer seeks? The truth. You're looking for the truth of whatever that matter is. That's the main thrust of what you're doing. Thank God we still have a lot of explorers in this world today, okay? And the things that they do, they're looking for the truth. You'll never find the truth if you don't look for it. That's a very important statement, and that's what you gotta remember about Byrd. So he supposedly flew over the Antarctic and reported seeing animals and trees and fauna. And what was he looking at in Antarctic? Okay, you got to ask this because he was beyond that. Now let me talk about the ice wall. The ice wall. This is gonna boggle your mind. Okay. Guess how high the ice wall is, okay? It is highest point, it's 13,500 feet. Think about that a moment. That is a big wall, okay? That is a very high thing, okay? And it equals the mountains. One of the mountains in Antarctica is actually an ancient volcano, and it is almost as high as Everest. Think about this. This is amazing. And Kilimanjaro in Africa is nothing compared to that. That is a big mountain. And there is one mountain down there that looks very suspiciously like a pyramid, okay? I'm serious. It does. It looks very much like a pyramid. Why does that keep popping up all over the world? Why do we keep finding pyramids? That's another question for another time, but that's interesting that you're going to find one in Antarctica. And I'm gonna tell you something. I don't know about you, and they will tell you as geologists. You gotta wonder about geologists sometimes, okay? Because they are very dead set in their opinions on things, and I have to question some of the things they come up with sometimes. But they say, "Oh, this is a naturally occurring mountain." I've never seen one look like that, and I've been in a lot of mountains in my time. Okay, I've climbed some mountains in my time. I've never seen one like that. It does not. That looks like a pyramid. That is very strange, okay? And so it's a question of lying to people. Are you really telling a lie or are you telling the truth here? Or what are they trying to cover up? And when you look at the satellite imagery, listen to this flimsy excuse, okay? This is mind-boggling. They say that when you look at the imaging, the Google Earth imaging on the Antarctic, you don't see anything, okay? Oh, it's blanked out, it's blank. You might see a couple of little points here and there, okay? But mostly 90% of it is blanked out. You don't see a whole lot. You don't see that ice shelf a lot. There's a big ice shelf there, okay? A lot of people died on that ice shelf, by the way. They've been found frozen in their tents and all that. It has a history of a lot of bad luck stuff going on there. Anyway, when you look at this satellite imagery, why it's so bleary and blanked out and all that, they will tell you this flimsy excuse. Oh, well, satellites don't do good around the poles. They don't do imagery around the poles. Now, they can take a fly on a glass of tea in London, okay, but they can't get an image around that pole. Come on now, don't tell me that. That's ridiculous. That's out and out fabrication, okay? I don't buy that, and they say the same thing about the North Pole. There's a lot of stuff going on in the North Pole. And they even will ask you, here's a big question right now going along with it. Have we ever really truly found the North Pole? That's a question they still don't know. They really don't have an answer for. Have we ever truly found it? Admiral Byrd supposedly flew over that too, okay? And he reported there seeing a massive entrance, supposedly, with a mile around it, pollen on the ice. Now think about this a moment. What's pollen doing on the ice, the North Pole? That doesn't. Where did it come from? That's the question you got to ask. Where did it come from? And if it didn't, and there's no trees at the North Pole, my friends. Okay, you're not gonna find any trees there. You know, no bushes, no grass. Where's this pollen coming? Did it possibly come out of that hole he supposedly found? You got to wonder about that, you know. And he supposedly found the same kind of entrance in Antarctica. Okay, now here's what they say happened. A lot of people conjecture this happened. Now, if you're jumping off place for Antarctica, guess where that's at? South America, okay? Argentina, as a matter of fact, okay? Let me ask you one quick question, Shetty. When all the Nazis fled Nazi Germany at the fall of the rank, where did they all run to? Where did they most of them went where? Argentina. Well, yeah.
I was going to say Africa as well, but I know it was a lot of it was Argentina, and of course, paperclip was America too, wasn't it?
Yeah, and you know, a lot of them supposedly went to Argentina and Bolivia and places like that. They went as far from Germany as possible and tried to lose themselves in the wilderness-like areas or the jungle areas like in Africa and different other places as well. And the higher echelon of the Nazis supposedly went to Argentina. Okay, that's where, you know, Joseph Mengele supposedly went. And even supposedly a lot of theories say Adolf Hitler ended up there. That he didn't really die in Germany. That's where he ended up. And by the way, my father, who fought in World War II, never believed that Hitler died that day in that bunker, without a doubt, because he knew, like a lot of them knew, Hitler had a bunch of doubles. After that assassination attempt on him, he doubled up on the doubles, okay? He really went all out on that. Who do they know really died in that bunker, okay? And reading about the last days of Hitler, and I've been fascinated by this for many years, and the trail leads to Argentina, by the way, to Bolivia and Argentina and places like that in South America, okay? And I've got a reason for talking about this, okay? That trail leads there, and there are certain German Nazi installations built there. You can go to this day and see the ruins of them. Why were they so interested in South America? Because it's the jumping off place to the one place that nobody knows about, to the one best secret kept in this on this planet, Antarctica. Yeah, that's where you go. That's the jumping off place. If you and I were to get on a ship today, Shanty, and head for the Antarctica, we would have to charter one. Guess where? Argentina. Okay, we could head out from Australia, but it would make more sense to go from Argentina. Okay, because it's closer. That's where most everybody that goes to the Antarctic goes. They come from Argentina or South America, okay? And that's the jumping off place. And the Nazis knew this well, too. And this is where the rumors and supposed stories began of a secret Nazi base in the Antarctic. Think about it. That's a perfect place for one. A submarine base, supposedly, okay? Now, let me tell you why submarine, okay? Because in the winter, it's almost impossible to get, and I'm talking about the winter of Antarctica. It's almost impossible to get to Antarctica. You have to have icebreaker ships to reach it, okay? It's not a pleasure cruise place, okay? It's not like going to Alaska. You don't get to do that there in Antarctica, okay? You only have a window of opportunity to get to this continent in certain times of the year. And if we were to charter a boat, we would definitely have to do that. So the certain times of the year, boat's not going to work. But guess what the perfect way to get to Antarctica is? Submarines. That's the perfect way to go. And that makes sense when you think about it. Not just a base, but a submarine base being here. Yeah, that makes perfect sense when you think about it. So if I were to point to an area that would have a secret sub base, it would definitely be like South America and Antarctica, because they're connected here. And what is that connection going on? You know, you got to look at that and say, I see some smoke. Where's the fire at? You know, because there's definitely something going on here with this. And why were they so interested in building military installations? And guess what? Most of the military installations face Antarctica. Why is that? It's not because they're guarding something, okay? It's because radio communication would be kept that way. Your antenna arrays have to face a certain way, you understand? Especially over long distances. That makes perfect sense when you think about it. Amelia Earhart supposedly had that problem with her Lockheed that she was flying. Supposedly when she left, I think one airport in Hawaii, she accidentally broke her antenna base off the plane. Supposedly they saw photographic evidence of this happening, and that may have caused her to disappear. I mean, that might have been a possible cause for some things that happened to her on that last leg of her journey. If your antenna goes out, you got a problem, you know? And so when you look at that, that makes perfect sense when you think about it. Why were the Nazis so interested in the Antarctic? Because nobody else was there. Think about it a moment. Nobody else was there. Perfect place to go, okay? The only other place you could go that nobody would be at, and here's another story we're going to talk about, the moon, okay? But we'll get to that in a minute.
I just want to, if you don't mind, I want to just chime in here because you're talking about the Nazis and no one else was there. But we're also aware at this point that the Nazis had technology after the Second World War that no one else had. If we just look at Germany after the First World War, and I do believe that was one of the big reasons why, you know, Hitler was kind of targeted in certain ways in the Second World War, because he pretty much had the technology that no one else had, and I do believe that's why they were taking the scientists on Operation Paperclip afterwards. But it's interesting that because they must have known, Dennis, something then. The Nazis would have gone there first because they would have known something that the rest of the world didn't, or there was something there they would have been given, because if they were already ahead with technology, they would have been given information, surely, right? But whoever was giving them this superb technology.
If you want to keep your technology secret, you got to go to a secret place, okay? And if you're flying around in flying saucers, it's kind of hard to keep that secret, okay? You got to look at it that way. But what if, okay, and let's step back a moment. Supposedly the Nazis were getting technology from the Vril, the women of the Vril. Remember those? The women that were mediums, and they were connecting an alien source supposedly to get this, download this technology, okay? And a lot of people to this day speculate, was it alien or was it fallen angels or demons or whatever the situation was that they were getting this information from, okay? And why would you give it to the Nazis? Think about this a moment, okay? Perfect vehicle to get out what you want to do. But what if they got this technology and they started experimenting with the glockenspiel, as it's called, the bell, flying saucer type thing? If they start experimenting with this, you don't do it flying around Germany. You're not going to do that. That doesn't make sense. Somebody's going to spot it sooner or later. Somebody's going to see it. They're going to take pictures of it. The perfect place to hide something like that would be in the jungles of South America or the Antarctic, especially if you made a base down there. And supposedly that is what Byrd saw when he supposedly flew over the ice wall. He saw the secret Nazi base. And they tried, I think, even the reports that they tried to shoot him down or whatever the situation was. And he went back supposedly and reported what was going on. And the powers that be, a lot of the governments, said, oh, no, we don't mess with that. Leave them alone. Because their technology at that time supposedly was superior to that of the United States and other countries, okay? The Nazis were supposed to be that far advanced in certain areas, okay? We do know with Operation Paperclip, they stole a bunch of Nazi scientists to finally get us to the moon. That's what it took. We know that went on, okay? So the United States and Russia and Great Britain, they all went after what? As soon as they conquered the Nazis, they went after the technology and the people that knew the technology well. And you got to remember this, if the Vril were even just a little bit real and a little bit right, They had a handle on technology nobody else had. Where did it come from, and why did they get it? And guess what? Now here's another mind-blowing thing. All of this started not on another planet somewhere. All of this supposedly began under the earth. The civilization under the earth, okay? That's where, and when you start looking at these things, Shanty, the more indicators you begin to see to point down that way. You know, the more flags come up and say, hey, keep looking at that. Look at all of the stories that tell us about the fairyland, this underneath us. All of the different, even hell. Where's hell? That's supposed to be underneath us, okay? What is it pointing down to? Is it pointing to other dimensions on this world? Without a doubt. If there are other dimensions, and if these dimensions coincide with us, are they not one step over in reality? You got to wonder about that, you know? And what if they found this secret base supposedly down there? And that's just one of the theories. If they found this base and were scared to mess with it at that time, and we've made this statement before, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The technology that you have today, that you are utilizing, that you're using, your cell phone, your computer, all the technology you have on hand right now is 100 years behind what the government has. Don't ever forget that, okay? And if you're 100 years ahead of what the government's got, they're scared of you. They don't want to mess with you, okay? Because you've got it over on there. It's just like the big dogs. If you can't run with the big dogs, you don't get off the porch, okay? You stay on the porch. And they couldn't run with the big dogs at that time. Supposedly that's what happened, and that's why they shut down Byrd and all this stuff. Now, Byrd supposedly had diaries, and I find it very interesting what happened to them. We've got several of them. We've got a couple of them that you can go this day. One was found just recently in 1996 that nobody knew existed. But nothing about the ice wall here. What happened to that? What happened to that diary of 1929? What happened to it?
The 1996 diary sounds like a bullshit story to me. That sounds like someone.
I think that was planned. That was a plan.
That was.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why that was a plan, Shanty. That was a plan to throw people off the trail. If you want to throw people off the trail, you put out false leads, or what we call a red herring. You put out a red herring, you get them off the trail. That's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that was.
That's not a. That wasn't a real diary. Now, if you go back to I think you were saying the 1929 diary. Yeah. Well, I think. It's clear that they would have kept them, destroyed them, but more like kept the information. I don't think that information's been destroyed. That's just my intuition. They would have kept the information for themselves. Someone was actually saying, that he was a Freemason. Byrd was a Freemason. Well, who knows? Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean the information that he's bringing back isn't good. It means that obviously what the controllers will do with that information, well, that's up to them, right? But his information doesn't necessarily mean it's not good. So I think that, a lot of that, I believe, would have been kept for them. That's how they would have done a lot of their research. That's how they would have had their knowledge, right? Dennis. I thought for a moment Dennis is staring at me very, very intensely. But anyway, well, that's my opinion. I don't know. What do you guys think? What happened to the diaries of Byrd? My intuition is just like screaming bull crap for the latest one that came out. That was definitely not, in my opinion, one of his. But earlier, yes, I think they probably would have been kept, and for the information.
I think I must have said something somebody didn't agree with. Okay.
You were staring at me very intensely for a very long time. I was getting nervous.
Yeah, I think they're getting nervous. We're making somebody nervous out there, definitely. But what I was going to say, I think, yeah, I agree with you. That was a plant. And here's the interesting thing about finding the diary. Now, this Admiral Byrd's son was on the trail trying to find his father's diary, the last one that supposedly talks about the ice wall and all that stuff. He was on the trail to find that. And they found this plant. Okay, that's what we'll call it, the planted diary. In 1996 or 97, the year later, his son died. Admiral Byrd's son died mysteriously, okay, and found in a warehouse, I think, somewhere. Here's the weird thing. Why does this keep happening? I have seen this same pattern in a lot of UFO investigations. People keep turning up dead, doing weird suicides. There was one suicide. I'll tell you this right quick, and this is straight out of a CIA book, okay? There was one guy that supposedly hung himself with hospital sheets from a bedroom, from the hospital bedroom, and they looked later on, they said there's no way the sheets could have made it to the window for the guy to do this. He did not hang himself. What happened? The CIA always, when they do away with you, they make it look like a suicide. Okay, that's one of their main things they do. And here's the weird thing about supposedly with Admiral Byrd's son, had Alzheimer's disease, supposedly. Okay, this is what they say after he. Now, a lot of the people in the family say, hey, we didn't know about that. Where did that come from? You know, a lot of people's families say, because Byrd had like 4 children, I think 3 daughters and 1 son. And they said, we didn't know about this, or we didn't, this is something we hadn't heard about. And this is, supposedly he was found with the wrong kind of clothes on, missing 1 shoe, and looked like he'd been wandering around. Somebody said it didn't look like Alzheimer's. It looked like the guy had been drugged. And that's another thing out of the playbook of the CIA. They drug you, okay? They do that. They do these things, okay? I'm not saying the CIA done him in, but it's very, very suspicious that you go under those kind of circumstances. Very strange, especially when you're looking for certain item that nobody wants you to find. That's
Dennis. Do you really doubt? Yeah. Do you really doubt that the alphabet boys and girls do unalivings to keep? I mean, for sure. I don't even doubt that. In my opinion, what I feel there could possibly have happened is that Byrd's son had some of the diaries. He might have had some of the missing diaries or some information. And there's another thing about this too. Okay, we need to look at as well. If you didn't see a Nazi base and he's flying over there and he didn't see dinosaurs, okay, supposedly dinosaurs in the jungle like that, this left in the Antarctic. What did he see? What's a possibility? I think a very distinct possibility, even more so than a Nazi base, which could have been there, and even dinosaurs, which could be there. And we talked about those that may still be in the Congo. Okay, that's not that big of a deal. What if there's something else going on here? What if beyond that ice wall, another civilization waits for us? Yeah,
that we don't know about.
That's what I'm saying. It's like a whole different, and I think you and I were talking off air about the movie King Kong inspired. So that would make sense to me that there were probably otherworldly creatures there, and maybe not looking the same as humans or something like that. Absolutely. Lots of different life and intelligence forms. And it's interesting.
Well, here's the freaky thing about that. The freaky thing about that. What if all these UFOs? Now, here's an enigma of the UFO thing, and I've been involved in UFO research for many decades now. Here's the interesting thing about where do these different ships come from? Why, if they're not uniform, if they're coming from one certain planet or one certain race of beings, why are these things all different? There is an answer to that, okay? But it may be more of a complex answer, okay? But you got to look at it this way. If it's not different civilizations involved, okay, and it's all coming from like reptilians or the Nordic looking ones or whatever the situation with the aliens, okay, if it's not that, why are these different ships keep showing up? You got different kind of, you got the classic saucer and then you've got other kind of looking ships and all that. You have some of the possibilities that you need to look at here. And of course, are they like coming from the future? Could these be people from the future investigating, looking at us like you would germs through a microscope and trying to figure out what we did or what? Could they be visitors from the future, our future? Okay, that's a possibility. Could these also be ships or entities from inside the Earth? That's another possibility to look at. These may be inner Earth and not outer Earth beings
Yes.
that are interested in us or looking, checking, they'll keep an
Yes.
eye on us, just what,
Yes.
for safety
Yes.
reasons. Yeah. And
Let's think.
also, but what if, here's another possibility. What if they're coming from a civilization that already exists on this planet
Yeah,
in a
coming
place
back.
like
Future.
Antarctica? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the future coming back. That too plausible actually in a way, because I mean if you look at how timelines work, and if we can think it, if we can discuss it, God has already thought it, right?
I had a teacher.
Joanne, hello. Thank you, Joanne. Joanne has just given us a sticker.
I had a
So
teacher that told me one time, if it's not one thing, it's another, but it might be all of it. Okay. And you may be hitting on something here. These things may be actually part of it, may be the answer that they are coming from the future. Another part of it could be it's another civilization that's here on this planet or in another dimension of this planet that we don't know about. It could be that they could be coming from, maybe it's all three. We don't know. But
I definitely believe it's all three. It's multidimensional. So it could absolutely. It's also interesting for me, when we're looking at the hollow earth theory and stuff like that. And we do know that NASA has gone to great lengths, along with whoever their allies are, to create spaceships that actually look like spaceships. So we've also got to be aware that what's NASA and what's like an alien life force. So I always have the question though, Dennis, is it, I definitely believe there are outer planets, 100%.
I have to make this statement though, Shanty. When you look at the record of things that we have seen or interacted with or encountered in the skies of this world, they are moving in a way perpendicular to mechanics. Okay, you and I could not survive a 180-degree turn in the ship that fast. We would be jelly when they open the door. We would pour out. Okay, we'd be liquid or something. But what if the things that are driving these ships or whatever they may be,
Okay.
what if they are spiritual and not flesh and blood? They could withstand forces like that. Whereas in flesh and blood could not. Yeah.
Well, let's look at people like some of the secret space survivors. One in particular that I speak to is Penny Bradley. And Penny Bradley was literally, and this is in the interview, she was spliced as a child, had DNA added to her so that she could withstand the type of stuff you're talking about. We actually had exactly that conversation on, I think, could have been, in fact, the last interview I did with her. I'm actually talking to her again this week. But that's what she was saying, is that they definitely, that's what the super soldiers are. They have certain additions to them that make them superhuman.
Well, yeah, I think that once a time,
that enable them to be able to.
I think once upon a time, I think this world had a different DNA than we have now, too. Okay, and there may be throwbacks to that. I believe without a doubt, when you look at biblical times that are described in ancient books and manuscripts that describe all this stuff's going on, you had a completely different world at that time. And what if that world still exists in the end, beyond the ice wall and to a certain extent? Because you had a different world that we lived in here before. We call it the antediluvian world. And you had bigger things in. That's where you get the giant spiders like the Batafofi that we talked about in the Congo, and you supposedly had giant mosquitoes. You had animals like the rhinoceros that were like 3 times larger than what you got today. You had, of course, the mammoths. You had all these different things. You had a different world, completely different world. And the people that existed in that world were completely different in many ways, DNA wise, than you and I are. That's why those people could live to be 900 and some odd years old and all this stuff. I think a lot of times that the DNA would explain that. And what if you have throwbacks to that every now and then in every certain generation, or if you can scientifically do that, like a government project, that you can inject someone with the remnants of this DNA and do things to them that will change them molecularly. They would love that kind of stuff, okay? Because it is rumored that the Nazi scientists had access to a lot of this stuff, thanks to the Vril. They found out how to utilize certain aspects of human DNA.
Yes.
So guess what? They weren't just playing with Mengele wasn't that concerned with what twins were doing. He was concerned more with why are they doing that? In other words, he was trying to figure out what made them what they were. And what you are and what I are is our DNA. That's what we are. Okay, no matter what, we can't get away from that. And if the DNA can be manipulated, which I think is being done by governments worldwide on a grand scale here. Okay, I think that's where the key lies. It's not the implantation of things, although there may be implants to monitor certain aspects of your DNA. But what are they doing with the DNA? That's the main question. What are they doing with the DNA? Okay. Are they trying to get back to that antediluvian world where things were completely different once upon a time? You had apples this big. You had, cherries that were as big as footballs. You had a bigger, different world, completely different from what we're existing in today. Maybe they're trying to recapture that dimensional aspect of this world. Maybe it still exists to a certain degree beyond the ice wall, and they know that. Okay? And maybe they're going there and getting this DNA. You got to have samples, okay? You got to have samples. Where's it coming from, okay? You can't walk in Walmart and buy it, okay? You got to find it somewhere, wherever it may be. What if the Tartarian society or the civilization that we knew, pockets of it still exist? Why did Byrd want camps in the Antarctic? He established camps there. One of the camps they froze some guys froze to death in. I remember that. But why did he go to that extreme? Why did he think it was so important to stick with that? Did he have a reason? Yes, he did. He had a very valid reason. We don't know exactly what that reason was, but we can suspicion what it may have been. That he found something there that was beyond extraordinary. That he knew, that, hey, my country needs this. He was a very patriotic guy, and he was saying, hey, my country needs this. Maybe we need to get a handle on this. Just like Columbus planting a flag in the New World, or planting a flag on the moon, Hey, we need to plant a flag here. To this day, though, people, they have come to secret agreements now. I want you to listen to this, folks. They have come to secret agreements among the nations of the world to leave the Antarctic alone to a certain degree. They can put base camps with very rigid rules and regulations that you have. Why is that? Why are they wanting to keep
it? The question is, who makes these rules and regulations at the Antarctic as to who can go there, what you can put up there? Who's in charge? Who's the boss there?
Yeah, and you know something? What I found beyond that ice wall? I found a wall of secrecy. That's what they put up around that for a reason. Okay, they don't just do it for no reason at all. They're not worried about the environment and saying, we need to leave that alone, one place that we need to. They have found evidence that once upon a time that Antarctic, had civilizations there, definitely without a doubt. They have found trees, they have found animals there. That was a jungle down there. Okay, that was a violent part of this world. It wasn't a hostile environment then, like it is now. No. That changed too, And you're looking. Now, when you look at the Antarctic, and here's what makes me so suspicious about this stuff. When you look at the Antarctic, you're looking at Earth millions of years ago. Not thousands, but millions of years back in time. What is still left there that they don't want you to know about? Why is it blanked out on the maps? Why? What are they keeping quiet? What secret agreements have they made about this place? And what was the reason for that? Could it be the remnant of Atlantis that's still there? I'm going to tell you something, and I've been fascinated by Atlantis my whole life. Okay, it's a fascinating subject. I was investigated inside out and upside down. Okay, every which way you could turn it, and I think without a doubt, not just the memory of Atlantis, but I believe Atlantis itself, in many ways, is still with us. It may be in our DNA. Okay, and it definitely may be in places like even the Congo or in Antarctic, or in certain wilds of Alaska. It may be certain pockets with these parts of this is left for us to find out. We know that things like the Nephilim exist, and it may be that the Nephilim had a big part in this as well, because you're looking at a lot of dark technology. When you think about the Nephilim, you got to remember this. According to what biblical sources say, the fallen angels gave this dark technology to mankind. Somebody did, okay? Gave this dark technology, and it was not good for us. Just like giving a 5-year-old a loaded revolver. Sooner or later, something bad's going to happen, okay? And that's what they did to us. They gave us a fully loaded revolver to play with here because they had bad intentions for us, not good intentions, whoever was doing it. And that makes me think, hey, yeah, that sounds like, what fallen angels would do, okay, in that respect. But anyway, what if a lot of this is hidden beyond that ice wall? And there are certain other places they know about. And guess what? Another vast unexplored area. And even the Bible talks about the things under the sea.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. You got to think about that as well. So these are all secret areas. Yeah. What's going on with it? I call them different dimensions. When you and I put on scuba gear today and we go down, and let's say we go off the Great Barrier Reef and we go exploring and flying and swimming around, which would be fun to do. But we are in another dimension. We are basically in another dimension. We don't belong there. We're not sea creatures. We're not mermaids or mermen and all that stuff. We don't belong there. We're in another dimension. When you step into the Antarctic, you're in another dimension. When you step into the North Pole, you're in you got to look at it this way. When you and I step into the Congo, if we leave a city and go into the Congo, we're in another dimension. Okay.
It's even when you're traveling to like countries, okay, like from South Africa, you go to Peru or something like that. It literally is, the people that live there, they breathe differently. Because it's such a different climate, they adjust differently. And it's like what you were saying about the creatures that were big and etc. Yes, and it's exactly what I want to say there is that it was a different dimension and also more oxygen. So, and it's so true, Dennis, what you're saying. This earth has different dimensions. And I think people experience as well different dimensions of the earth without realizing that's what's happening. And that's why sometimes we have weird experiences that we can't explain or overlapping timelines or something like that. And I think, I love this. I love these conversations because this is how we start just awakening something in our soul, because our soul knows the truth. All of our souls know the truth. We've just got to, we're here on a journey of discovering the truth, right? That's what you said. Why do discoverers go out? Because they want the truth. So we are a bunch of discoverers, yeah, which is actually very interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to explore one more thing about the Antarctic today that I find fascinating to think about. What if Admiral Byrd found something else entirely different in the Antarctic? What if he flew through a portal? What if there's a portal in the Antarctic that's switched on and doesn't ever turn off, okay? What if this is where the Stargate is, or whatever you want to call it,
right,
that is what's left on our world, okay? What if he flew through that and went back in time and saw the Antarctic millions of years ago? He saw the dinosaurs and all that walking around and flew back out and he said, hey, what have I found here? The countries of the world want this. What if they know this exists? Well, think about this a moment. What if they know this thing is switched on down there? but they're scared to death of it. They don't know what they can do with it. Okay, because it's just like a caveman poking a bear with a stick. Okay, you don't know what that bear's going to do when you get him awake. You talk about awake, and you don't want to wake bears up. Okay, they get very grouchy when you wake them. I've run into a few of them, and I know what I'm talking about. But anyway, when you poke the bear or the dragon or whatever, however you want to say it, you got to be ready for what's going to happen next. Okay, and like you say, it's one thing to awake; it's another thing to stay awake. That's the main thing. You got to stay awake when you see it. But what if they encounter that? What if it's switched on down there and they don't know what to do with it? Is this jumping off point for the rest of the galaxy that we don't know about? What's going on here, with that thing? So there are a lot of conjecture, a lot of theories that are going around it, and what if all the UFOs are coming through this portal in Antarctica? That's their gateway. Okay, what if that's so, and you got to wonder, is that what he found? There's so many different things,
I'm just looking at Moonlight Weaver. Atlantean technology is in heavy use in the underground military bases. It takes specific. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. So it's like, thank you for this comment, Moonlight Weaver, because I think when I was interviewing Caleb Jade back about a year or so ago, and he was talking about this technology that they were actually sent to find in the military, and you had to have a certain blood type, and the technology responded to only you. So there were only certain people that this archonic technology actually responds to. So not everyone can use it. You have to be of a certain vibration. And what Moonlight Weaver is saying, Atlantean DNA makes sense to me. But even there's also nasty Atlanteans. So I guess absolutely, you do need certain DNA, and you would need to be of a certain frequency to be able to do certain jobs. And I go back to like what Penny Bradley was saying, because she was, for the viewers who don't know, Penny Bradley is also a guest on my channel. She's a secret space program survivor, and she was for many years the pilot of the Nachtwaffen, which was one of these German spaceships that they were using off.
Well, here's the interesting thing about it.
Yeah, what she's saying is that as a kid, as a youngster, she had certain injections or additions to her DNA. She was obviously of the right bloodline, already had a lot of the right things in place, and then she had additions made, and that's what enabled her to do that. So I think that's what happens when you listen to a lot of the.
Well, that would definitely tie into the Nephilim. That would definitely tie into the Nephilim theory, the bloodline thing, and the Morgovians and all that. But I think there may be remnants of Atlantis still with us to this day, Chantelle, and not just in the DNA. It can also be pockets of it all over the world in different areas, and it may be these portals. It's been theorized that one of the powers of Atlantis, one of the things they could do, that they had, that this was not just a city, it was a civilization like the Tartarians that we talked about, a civilization like that existed on this planet. And the way that they traveled was not through trains or flying machines. They traveled through portals. And you had different entrances all over the world. You had different portals. We call that porting, by the way. To port means to teleport from one place to another. You could do that. Yeah. And so that might explain why there's a lot of weird, mysterious disappearances, that people disappear and can walk into certain areas and never seen again. What if they're falling through some of these portals that are still open? What if one of them switched on the Antarctic? We don't know. But I think without a doubt, Atlantis in many ways is still with us, not just in our DNA, although that is a remnant. And I think that a lot of these ancient bloodlines that we talk so much about, that, like not just the Morgovians, but, the Beiderbecks and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all these things are connected by the simple fact that they have remnants of that DNA still remaining in their DNA. Now they've got mostly human DNA, but there may be a small remnant of that DNA left, and this is what a lot of science today is interested in. I don't know if you remember this, but many years ago there was a television show. It was called The Immortal, and what it was about this guy. He had the rarest blood in the world. He was an absolutely rare. They made him live longer and gave him immortality. And all the rich people in the world were after him for his blood. They were out to get him, because they wanted this blood. Hey, we get this blood, we can utilize, we can live forever. And here's the weird thing, and I thought about this, many years later. It was a great show. It was a great TV show. It didn't last long, unfortunately, but it was a great thing. It was, I think it might have come from somebody like Richard Matheson who wrote it or something. But anyway, it was a great writer. Anyway, it got me thinking, what if, there's certain people out there that have that blood and they would definitely have a target on them. If certain people found out that you had a remnant of this in your blood, they would come after you, looking for you or trying to find you. They would be searching through people, like going through a file, looking for someone that has this certain aspect of the DNA that they want. What if that's got a lot to do with a lot going on in the world today? What if these cabals, these secret societies, a lot of these Satanists and all these things are working together, trying to find certain people with certain bloodlines that they can utilize for certain nefarious reasons? You got to wonder about that, Well, and I think that would be a remnant of Atlantis remaining with us too, because that would definitely, there are many stories throughout the world, especially in Ireland, of people showing up out of nowhere. They considered them to be gods. They had a technology beyond what they had. Does this not sound like the survivors of Atlantis or something? To me, that makes perfect sense when you think about it. And they said, we don't know what these guys are, but let's call them fairies. And we drive them underground, to keep them away from us. There was mankind. We got to always remember this, Shanty. When mankind, unfortunately, and I'm not bragging on this, okay? Mankind, whenever he finds anything he does not understand, he will do one of two things. He will either try to control it or destroy it. Okay? That's the way man works. Unfortunately, that's the way he looks at it. That's the way the government looks at it. If we can't make a weapon out of it, we can't control it, then we will destroy it.
That's the way the devil thinks, Dennis. So that's the devil's way of thinking, or that's the usurpers or the controllers' way of thinking. Actually what really works is the opposite. When you let go, there's a great paradox in letting go, because when you let go, you let God, because as you let go, you allow God to be and to express. Most of us
what you're basically doing is you're pushing God out of the way and say, here, God, hold my beer while I do this,
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a good thing to do, but that's the way people look at it. And yeah.
It's very interesting. Wow. Yeah, I mean, if we look at the whole Atlantis thing as well, because when we look at Atlantis, because, it was supposedly the golden age when humanity had reached their greatest spiritual heights. And then, of course, what took over was the floods. And that's very interesting, because for me, what is floods? What is water? Water is emotion. Water is feeling. It's the feminine breath that moves through humanity. And that's the thing that was missing, in my opinion, in Atlantis. And that, at the end of the day, is why God allowed it to fall. Everything happens for a purpose. Nothing is an accident, as we understand. Although when really these things happen, we don't always remember that. But everything is as it's supposed to be. And what I see now is we really have to learn from what did we learn from Atlantean times? Those were amazing times as well. We had a lot of spiritual awareness. God was very present in a lot of our actions there. But by the same token, there was the flip side of that, where we had exactly what's happening here. The dark priests who were doing all these chimeras, who were splicing all sorts of animals and humans together and hoping and creating these dark creatures of the night,
When you,
which makes a lot of sense, because when we're looking at Area 51 and we speaking like this, it would make sense that that could well be right there, remnants of Atlantis, because that's the kind of shit they did in Atlantis, but in the negative polarity. Positive was very different. Atlantean beings were amazing, you know, on the light aspect, but the flip side of the belly, very nasty. So when you look at how it would make sense that that's where they actually created the control from, if we know what we know. You know, like literally the floods, when Tartaria fell, all of that, you know, that whole knock-on effect, so that the dark side of Atlantean energy could take over. Exactly what's happening here now, because this is the dark side of Atlantis we're experiencing.
well, when you when you disregard the divine laws of the universe and the spiritual laws that are in place. There are spiritual laws out there too, folks. We can't ever forget that. The Creator has laid down certain spiritual laws, physical laws, such as that. And when you violate these laws, you better be prepared to pay a price, and it will be a bad price because you're going against what's been laid out. We must understand that, and that's what the story is about Atlantis. They got to the pinnacle of technology and to the pinnacle of spiritual awareness, and they crossed the bad line. You know, they crossed that final line they shouldn't have crossed, and they violated the laws of God and nature and all this other stuff, and this caused some bad stuff to happen. They didn't learn from their lesson, and we need to take a lesson from that, because no matter how great and evolved we may become, there's still the ego that we must deal with. The ego will always be there as sort of a shadow to trip you up if you're not careful. You've got to watch out about the ego. And I've often called it the beast inside of you that you got to keep under control. Maybe Atlantis violated that, and they let that beast loose the wrong time, and that's what destroyed them eventually. But whatever the case may be, I think, there's a moral lesson in that for us, No matter how great you think you are, eventually, pride will get you, okay? That's the way that goes, and it's very true. And I think that could have been what could have definitely happened with Atlantis, because they were the pinnacle of success, of technology. They had a technology that we don't even have, supposedly, to this day. And this is where man was at one time. Once upon a time, mankind was at this pinnacle and blew it, okay? And how many times have we done that? How many times have we done that? We never learned the lesson.
Yeah. But Dennis, then we have to, this is what I say, the lesson is, God crashed Atlantis with floods. What is floods? Floods is water. What does water represent? Emotion. What did we lack in Atlantis? Emotional intelligence. You can't have spiritual intelligence without emotional intelligence. We had no emotional intelligence there, which is why the negative forces were able to topple Atlantis. And God is saying, I'm sending you floods. You need to tune into the flow of energy. This is our opportunity now through emotion. Think about what I'm saying, guys. Through emotion. Emotion is the fuel that takes you places. It's either going to take you spiraling down or it's going to elevate you. So when you are still stuck in your head, trying to concoct all this intellectual, because that's exactly what Atlantis was about, spiritual awareness, intellectual awareness, all the technology. Your technology should never exist outside of you. That's what we had to learn from Atlantis. You are the technology. And when we learn that, no one can crush us again. You are the technology. Let Atlantis teach us all that. And it comes through the emotional awareness.
I forget who it was. I forget who it was that said that, Shanty, but it's very true. There's not a whole lot of difference, a whole lot of space between technology and sorcery. Okay, and it can be looked at that way, Yeah, and of course, alchemy, began. That's where chemistry started. There's not a whole lot of difference in that, you know.
No, you
But
see, alchemy is never meant to be something external. That's what they try to figure out what was going on inside. Alchemy is a spiritual alchemy where you understand the moment where pain transforms back into gold, where you've understood the lesson of the experience, which is exactly what elevates you to the next awareness, not external technology to yourself. That's what I keep saying. So Atlantis taught us the technology is not external to you. Yes, it was important to learn, important to know, important to understand these things. But when we actually understand spiritually what that means, that you are the technology, figure it out inside of yourself. That's what we have to do. You are your own spaceship. The Pleiadians aren't coming to fetch you. Your body becomes your resonance frequency and takes you to where you need to be. Do you physically fly? No, I don't think so. I don't know, maybe at some point, but more your frequency will put you in the right place at the right time, where you meet the right people and suddenly things move and flow. That's what it is. It's nothing external to us. And that's what human beings, we need to realize that. We are looking outside of ourselves for a savior, for someone who's going to come save us, for someone who's going to be the better president of our country, who's going to lead us, who's going to take out the child molesters, whatever. Not happening. We are the ones who have to do it. We are the ones who need to do that through our own.
Well, a lot of times, unfortunately, we don't want to do the long haul. That's why we don't. Human beings tend to get lazy and stuff. Yeah, unfortunately, they tend to get lazy. That's why, you know, I talk about that's the number one draw of fast foods. They're fast. They're easy. You don't have to go home and make your meal. You can buy it right then. You know, and that we've fallen into that. You know, complacency on things.
Talk about a quick way to lower your vibration. Junk food. Talk about a quick way to lower your vibration.
Yeah.
Junk food. Yep.
Absolutely. I think, you know, without a doubt, we get to a certain point in technology and all that. We don't need to become the technology. You know, we don't let these things become us in certain ways. We got to watch out for that. I think that may be another lesson from the Atlanteans. You know, you don't let your technology master you. You should master your technology. You know,
but
that's another aspect.
One.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, it's not anything outside of yourself. The technology I'm talking about is your own geometry. Your geometry as a human. You are created from sacred geometry. And we have forgotten that. So when you tune into your own sacred geometry and you have your own breath flowing through you, right? Then you become the conduit for God's word. It can be no other way. You are your energy, your frequency. That is your technology. That is your geometry. Not technology that even a pen says you should do this with that. No, you don't. It's from your heart. It's from within. And when you know that, you can never be at fault with inner technology. But until such time, we're going to look outside of ourselves for people to try and save us and do things for us and put a med bed there so we can get better.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there's many lessons that history can teach us. You know, on these things that we need to start paying attention. Like you said, it's one thing to wake up. It's another thing to stay awake once you have awakened. You know, and understand what's going on in the world and how to take these things. And but you know, what bugs me is the stuff that's hidden from us, so they try to keep from us. That's that old game of smoke and mirrors they're trying to pull here on us. You know, what are they hiding, and why are they hiding it, and why is it necessary? I think a lot of it definitely has to be the control that they want over us. You know, that's definitely part of the equation. And you know, that's like I said with disclosure, they'll never share their power of secrecy. That's where their power lies, in the secrecy of the secret things that they keep secret. They're not going to share that with you voluntarily. you know. And if true disclosure ever comes, it will come through podcasts like this and people like this that are work out there looking actively for the truth, you know. And like I said earlier, if you're gonna find the truth, you got to look for it, you know. You got to look for it. Yeah.
Exactly. And, they aren't going to give it to us because, governments are there to control us. They're there to deceive us. There's not one government on this planet that actually really has their people's interest at heart. It's theirs. So we have to, no one else is going to stand up for us except us. Why would they? They've been fat cats for so long, stealing and looting and living the best life ever. Why would they want to give that up for us mere mortals and us sheep and cows and goats and, all of that? So, yeah. Anyway, yay, Dennis. Thank you. What a great chat. And I appreciate you being here. And I appreciate everybody in the chat. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for joining us. Always awesome.
Well, if I ever make it over that ice ball, I'm going to take you with me, okay? Definitely.
You better take me with you, Dennis. You better take me with you. We're going to take pictures. We'll take videos like for our YouTube show. And we'll send our viewers our live shows. Climbing over the ice wall.
We need to get our ice climbing equipment out. Definitely.
Right. Dennis, is there anything you want to say in closing? And where can people get hold of you? And any shows you got happening? I'm just going to pop your banner up in a minute. So tell our viewers where you are for the rest of the week or for the rest of the 2 weeks.
Yes, if you love more interesting discussions like this, you come on over to my channel, the YouTube channel is Hunting the Shadows. I call it a YouTube channel and agency. I do some consultation work too. People who come to me with their paranormal problems and all that, they can contact me through DennisWCarroll.com, my website, and my books are available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Just look up the author Dennis W. Carroll, and my channel is on YouTube, and it can also on Facebook and also on
Dennis? I think Dennis is gone, guys. Can you hear me? Give me a quick hands up or whatever in the chat, please. Can anyone hear me? Okay, well, I think the show is over anyway. So I'm going to say goodbye, everybody. I will see you back tomorrow. We have a drop-in with Chantelle, and we having a look again at the Cabal, the sequel of the Cabal. Very interesting, very timeless, I think, as it's coming up at the moment. So I'll see you then. Okay, great. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, Dennis is freezing, and he... Okay, now it's just me. Okay, guys and gals, God bless you all. Take good care of your beautiful selves. And I'll see you tomorrow. And don't be naughty. Why not? Of course you have to be naughty. Don't be good.